entrepreneurs and professionals of Tampa Bay. Welcome to your hour for getting the information, the tools, and the connections for elevating your business. Welcome to Getting the Edge with Kelly Wilson. And here's your host, Kelly Wilson.
Welcome to Getting the Edge. I'm your host, Kelly Wilson. Thank you so much for being with us at this moment. I know you have a million other options and a million other shows you could be watching, and I'm very honored that you chose to be here with us, choosing to watch Getting the Edge. Getting the Edge is a great opportunity to bring in business owners, community leaders, and we want to talk about their products and services, but our main niche here and our goal is to really share stories. I am a firm believer that we can learn so much from each other's story, our journeys. We all have a unique path that we're on, but if we're able to share, we can learn so much from each other, and really that is really what Edge is all about. Actually, we just celebrated our 6th year in September. I can't believe it's been 6 years already, but Edge, we originally launched as it's a community, and we did 24 events a year, and really it was about bringing like-minded people together. I was in search of a unity, like-minded people, someone to tell me I wasn't crazy, somebody that would tell me it was okay to be innovative, and someone that would tell me it was okay to want to own my own business and want to help and bring people together. And I was able to do that by creating our own my own community. So now in our 6th year, we have our Edge Business Magazine. We had an amazing launch in September, and that was our first annual celebration of women. You can go to our website and check it out, edgebusinessmagazine.com. You can even subscribe and have it personally delivered to your home or office. Wow, this was such a great time. We did a big launch September 4th. All the images are on the website. Just a great time. Our Tampa Mayor Jane Castor was there, along with 9 other women that we featured, but we had close to 300 people there that night. Just an amazing night. So we're looking and working now on our next launch, which will be in January, so we'll keep you posted with that. We took a break for a while, and it's great to be back here at Getting the Edge, and there's still so many stories to share. So happy to be back. We are actually at Flavor of Tampa Bay on the northwest corner of Gandy and West Shore, owned by the former Buck player Ian Beckles. So if you're in the area, you can stop by and check out his marketplace. It's a great spot, great for venues. So if you're looking for a place to host, to have an event, definitely reach out to Ian Beckles and Flavor of Tampa Bay and come check out the space. So super excited about our sponsors, Pilot Bank. Thank you so much for being with us and supporting us, as well as WeBeam TV and Tampa Bay Multimedia, the amazing John Gaston. I'm honored and just thrilled to have been partner with him for quite a while now. If you're looking for any podcast, any video work, if you want your own Getting the Edge show, reach out to John. They'll definitely take care of you. And they're mobile too. It's not just about being in any particular studio. So a lot of different options. So again, thank you so much for being here. Again, check out our website. You can subscribe to our newsletters, get involved. We have community partner options, and we'd be happy to answer any questions for you. info@edgebusinessmagazine.com. So really excited about the show today. It's going to be an emotional one, I think, for me. Really very excited to have with us Ben Heldfond, who is just an amazing gentleman in the community, and just so open, and I appreciate you sharing your story. Ben, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Ben and we had the opportunity to meet a couple years ago, and I've kind of watched different things that you've got going on, and it's great to have you here. Congratulations on quite a few things. I know you've we're going to talk about your business a little bit, Heldfond Holdings, but you also just you co-published a book with your ex-wife, of all people, right? And that is, hopefully you can share some tips for us too, on that relationship and just how you keep that together. But so tell us a little bit about the book, Our Happy Divorce.
Our Happy Divorce, and it's strange within itself. One, that I'm actually an author. I think there's some English teachers in San Francisco right now rolling their eyes.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And secondly, that I wrote it with my ex-wife. And it took about 4 years to write. We'd get in fights, and she would say, "I'm not doing your effing book, and you can stick it where the sun doesn't," et cetera, et cetera. So, but we got through it, and we sort of took like you said, we're all just experience. We're all built of experiences,
Right.
and part of the reason that I wanted to write this book was the experience that I had as a child, and my parents' divorce, and it was one of not a happy divorce, and unfortunately, my brothers and sisters and I were put in the middle.
As so many of us are.
So many of
right.
us are.
I went through the same thing.
Yeah, and it's just a terrible place
Right,
to be.
right.
It's a terrible place to be, to hear your mom or dad talking bad about the other one, and being 13, 14 years old and having to sit there and take it.
It's funny. I remember I was just looking through pictures the other night, and there was a picture I found of my father and I, and and I immediately thought, oh my goodness, that was the night he told me my mom and dad were getting a divorce,
really?
and it was at a wedding, and I think he'd been drinking, but it's funny when I see that photo. That was that night.
Yeah.
And I was 7, maybe.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
And it stays with
40 years later.
Right, and the idea, I just want to put a stop to the idea that kids are resilient. The people who are going through it said, "Oh, the kids are fine; they're resilient." They're not. That divorce stuck with me for years.
Right.
And it's just like I said, it's a terrible place to be, being fed poison and hoping the other spouse dies. So I took that experience. I wish I could say that when Nikki and I decided to get divorced, that it was snap, happy divorce.
Right.
But it wasn't.
Right.
It was headed for, when you get divorced, you have the fruit salad of emotions.
Right. All the just the feelings. Right. It's definitely.
Everything. And I was on the path of destruction, and I hired this lawyer who took a look at the prenup, took a look at, and came up with a game plan. And however sick that sounds, but it was like a 25-page essay on how we were going to get out of this divorce.
But I think in that frame of mind, when you're in that, and that's kind of like, our happy divorce, you're not saying you expect somebody to write the book right as they're going through it. I mean, it's going to take time to get to that point, but that point is it's an option at some point,
well,
and you can decide to work towards that.
I went to a guy, and he, nothing against him. He's trying to make a career, but he was feeding me stuff that I wanted to hear.
Right.
He was, condoning my behavior, my actions, and so he wrote this thing. And for some reason, I didn't read it right away. I kept it in my backpack for a while, and I decided I was on a flight back from LA, and I decided to pull it out. And I got about 3 pages into it, and all of a sudden, I had the first moment of clarity of what it was like for me as a kid, and did I want to put my son through that? And I saw that if I went down this path, it was going to be like my parents.
And so your son is 16 now.
He's 16.
And how old was he when?
He was 4.
Okay.
He was 3 or 4, so he was little, but I said,
but
he was
still,
very aware.
Right.
And so I put it away. I called him on Monday, and I told him that I wanted to try a different route. And part of that route was me being able to see my part in the ending of the relationship, whereas before, when I left, it was all Nikki's fault. I was pointing the finger, it was her fault. If she deserves this because she did that, or whatever it was. And I took a look at my part. And at the end of that process, I realized that I wouldn't have wanted to be married to me either.
Right.
I wasn't a very good person. I wasn't happy. I wasn't spiritually grounded. I wasn't all these, things that a good husband is. I wasn't all that great of a father.
But how hard is that, like that reflection period? Because if we'd all come to that at some point, the whole world would be a happier place, right?
Well, and
but
I think that
people are always just continuously pointing fingers. They don't take that time.
They don't take the ownership
for that clarification.
And I think that if everybody just understood that, no matter what happens, or no matter what anybody does to you, or you think they do to you, everybody has a part. It takes 2 to make a relationship. It takes 2 to ruin a relationship. That's friendship. That's
every type
romantic.
of relationship, right?
And so, if you can go into it with that frame of mind, maybe, and just try to see your part in it, or what you did, or what you. So that's what I did, and that's what she did too. And then we came together, and I called her for coffee. And I hadn't talked to her in a while, because after I read that thing, I said, Nick, I just need some time. I don't want to talk about the divorce. I don't want to, we're co-parent, but I don't want to get too in the weeds, because I'm not, in the right place. So I called her to coffee. I sat her down. I told her I loved her. I also made amends for my part in ruining the relationship. She then in turn made amends to me and said she was sorry to me, and we joke, and it's a joke because it's actually real. That was the first time and only time I think either one of us has apologized to the other one. But from that moment on, there was a lot of room to move, because we not only said we're sorry, but we forgave each other, and then we made a pact that from this moment on that we put our son first, and so every decision we've made in the past 13 years has been about him.
Wow. And it's interesting. So 13 now years later, we've written this book together. And then so tell us a little bit about the book. And so you said it took 4 years to put the book together.
Yeah, so the book, and I don't know why it took 4 years. I think it was maybe out of fear. Every time I'd read it, my ex-wife got crazy mad at me, because every time I would read it, she'd say I'd make a change, right? So we need to rework it, because it was just fear. It was just like putting it out there, and I wanted to be perfect.
Well, we do that all the time with everything that we do. It's
and
perfection.
There's no such thing as perfect, right? And so finally, she just said, "Stop it.
Right.
You're not allowed to read this book anymore." And so then we added, but in the meantime, in those 4 years, our relationship had grown so much stronger, and it continually grows. And we brought new spouses into our lives. So then we thought they should have a chapter in the book too.
Right.
So my wife, Nikki's husband, and our son Asher all have chapters in the book, because all of them play an integral role in it. So what it is, it's just our experience. We're not doctors, we're not lawyers, we're just people who went through a divorce, didn't have the resources that people have today, which is amazing. But as crazy as it sounds, there was no social media when we got divorced.
Right.
There was no collaborative divorce. It was starting, and we actually went through the collaborative process, which I think everybody should do, which is basically you just sign a contract with your partner that you will work together. It's like mediation. You all work in the same room, and if you can't do it, and you've exhausted every measure, then you have to fire all the lawyers, and then you can go the traditional route.
Right.
But it wasn't part of the Florida statute at the time. Now it is. And now there's plenty of support groups online for divorce. So we just want to be one of those people, one of those resources that people can go to for inspiration and relatedness. Because in my life, I've learned and I've made the most changes through relatedness.
Right.
Not with people with a lot of letters behind their names or whatever. It was actually sitting down with somebody else who had been through what I've been through.
Wow. Well, congratulations on the book launch. And I know we've got the links, I think, provided in regards to where people can get the book. Definitely check out the book, especially, if you're going through something similar. It's always nice to read and kind of somebody else that's been there and kind of going through that. And you're, congratulations to you on the success with Heldfond Holdings. And, I know you're a successful businessman sitting here in this chair with me. And you're investing in different real estate, private equity, restaurants, record label. So congratulations on your success with that. But I know it didn't all start out rosy. And I want to really talk about, I know you just celebrated 25 years this past week with sobriety. And congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I would, and this is the only thing that goes above my kids, because it has to, but it's the proudest thing that I've done in my life. And the reason I say above my kids, because I have to put that first, always. And that's one of the reasons that I'm 25 years sober, is that I put my sobriety first before anything else. And if it weren't for that, I wouldn't have the life I have today. It's pretty simple math. I was a...
well, that's what I wanted. So let's go back to so you're not from Tampa. No. You grew up you were from California.
San Francisco.
San Francisco. Yeah. So so you went through early on in your life, you went through a divorce, or your family did. And then, so let's talk about earlier days. So when did alcoholism or drug abuse run in your family at all?
Yes, but I think it's more of the high-functioning alcoholics.
Okay.
It's not the bottom. There's no abuse from alcohol. I think that one could make an argument that we went through some abuse with the divorce, but that's just because our parents were blinded. They didn't premeditate it.
Right.
It's just that all those feelings you have kind of blind you to what you're really doing to your kids. And so it wasn't premeditated. But there's some lineage of alcoholism. My brother went through it to my older brother. He has 12 years of sobriety now. So my mom has 4 kids. 2 out of 4 have the disease, and 2 out of 4 have long-term sobriety, which is very abnormal. And so, you know, I grew up in an era where parents didn't track us. You know,
Right.
one thing about the divorce, no matter how hard it was, what I quickly learned at about 13, 14 years old was somebody with the mind of an alcoholic tries to gain any sort of advantage that I could. And then I quickly learned that my parents weren't talking to each other. So I could play the situation to my advantage, including staying out later. Because what I learned was my parents weren't parenting for best parent. They were
Right.
they were parenting from a position of favorite parent, right? So my dad, you know, what time does mom let you stay out on the weekends? You know, 12 o'clock. Oh, well, you can come home at 1. You
Right,
know, or
right.
how much money does mom give you when you go out on the weekends? You know, $10. Well, here's 20, 30.
Right.
So I quickly learned that I could game the system that way, and so I got a lot.
As any normal child would, right?
Or especially with this disease, right? That's the alcohol or the drugs or the shopping or the sex or the whatever it is just a symptom. And the disease is a feeling, and a feeling of, you know, not being a part of. And so, you know, I grew up that way, and then I finally found alcohol. And alcohol was my first, you know, the first thing I tried. And all of a sudden, you know, I was a pretty shy kid.
And how old were you?
I was in 6th grade, so I think it was, what was that, 10, 11 years old?
That you first tried alcohol?
I first tried alcohol. It was a party at Molly Guggenheim's house, and her dad had cleared out the living room as a little dance thing, and he had left the port. I'm imagining his port. It was a while ago, but it was in the crystal, you know, thing with the on the counter, and he left it there. And so me and my friends went over and we drank it. And I remember taking the sip of it. And it was the worst tasting thing. It tasted like I put gasoline in my mouth. But then I started getting that warm feeling, and I started, you know, not having that chatter in my head that I was less than, or that,
Right.
you know, I started talking to girls. And then I went over, and the second time I did it, I realized I didn't like the taste of it, so I held my nose and I, you know, took a sip of it. And then all of a sudden, it was party Ben. You know, I was instead of being part of the wallpaper,
Right.
I was in the middle of the dance floor, and I was dancing. And then I went over and I had another sip, and another sip. And eventually I ended up throwing up all over Molly Guggenheim's house. And my parents had to come get me and pick me up, so I got in trouble with the first time of drinking. But, you know, I loved the effect.
Right.
Hated the taste, but the effect was something that I'd been looking for, that quieting my mind.
Right.
You know.
Is port, is that like a wine?
I think it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's alcohol.
Right,
So
for
it's
sure.
a little stronger than wine, but it is awful.
Right.
You know, I don't know. People enjoy it, I guess, but not at 11 years old.
No,
Yeah.
no. So that is what? 11 is 6th, 7th grade?
Yeah, I think it was 7th grade. So whatever
Wow.
grade we were in 7th grade.
So then, and so obviously you liked that, and that made you then outgoing versus not. And then, so that's all part of what kind of plays into
Yeah.
that. And then you want to be that person. You want to quiet the mind.
Yeah, or fill the, you know, I think the good analogy is that I have this hole inside of me,
Right.
you know, and it's a spiritual hole. And it's that hole that tells me I'm not good looking, or I'm not, you know, smart enough, or whatever it is. And so what I found was I was trying for years to find a chemical solution to what really was a spiritual problem.
Right.
So, you know, once I got sober, I realized the only way to fill a spiritual problem is with a spiritual solution.
Right.
And because the problem is alcohol, and that was the thing that in the 80s was Nancy Reagan, just say no, right?
Right.
And that was the idea, just ignore it, don't say no. I said yes, and the thing they didn't tell me is that it works, right? Alcohol works, drugs work.
Temporarily.
Temporarily,
Right.
but you
Till
know,
they-
people can do it normally. You
Until
see
they destroy you typically at some point.
and,
Right.
and some people are able to do it normally
Right. This is
through
true.
their whole life.
This is
and,
true.
and you see them at parties, and they have a couple drinks, and they get loosey, and and it works, period.
Right.
You know, but over the course of a short amount of time, from the time I was 11 to 21, it stopped working. And it stopped, you know, there was like this endless, talk about that hole, there was like a big hole inside the hole that I'd put it in and just come right out. And it wouldn't, you know, it stopped working.
So then through high school, or then through like your, I guess through, this is elementary then, even, and through so junior high. So all this, you kept drinking. And then, so when did other drugs come into play?
I would say freshman year in high school is
Okay.
when the harder drugs. I mean, I smoked pot in 7th and 8th grade. I had an older cousin and older brother, and I like to hang out with them because they, smoked pot and
Right.
drank and had fake IDs and all the stuff that I was looking for, attracted to at the time.
Right.
But in high school is when I started experimenting with the harder drugs and the cocaine and hallucinogenics. I lived in San Francisco, so we walked down to Haight-Ashbury and get mushrooms and LSD and just whatever. I joked at the beginning, my drug of choice is whatever you had.
Right.
And so the first time I tried cocaine, a friend of mine, we bought a little bit of it. I don't know what an 8-ball is these days, but we bought a little bit of it. We did one line, and then he said he had to go to work the next day, so he was going to stop. And he was my neighbor. And so he did a line, we did a line. He said, I got to go to bed, we'll do this later.
You don't really stop, though, do you?
Well, so he went to bed, or went to his house to go to bed. 5 minutes after I got home, the high was sort of coming down, so I said to him, I called him on the phone and said, hey, just throw it out the window. I don't have to go to work tomorrow or anything, so I'm going to do a little bit more. I ended up finishing the whole thing, staying up all night. And so it was just one of those things that I could never do it normally.
Right.
And
it's that addictive personality.
It's addictive personality of more. I have a disease of more. It was chasing that, the high.
And it is scary, when you're dealing with that. Again, congratulations for being where you are today and being able to talk so openly about it. Because I know that your story is going to help someone else. Because no matter what stage you're at, or there is ways to get out and get help. And I think by talking about it, most of the time there's a stigma behind that. Nobody wants to admit kind of what some of the demons we face, I guess, or is diseases.
Well, there's a stigma because of society, what it puts on it. There's a lot of people who don't understand, and for lack of a better word, I'll call it ignorance. That it's a choice, that it's a lifestyle, but it's not. It's a disease, and it should be treated just like every other disease.
Wow.
But the beautiful thing, it's not although it's a terminal disease, there's no cure, but there's a treatment. And I'm one who's just been in remission for 25 years. My treatment is the same as somebody who's come in their first day, right? And so when I go off the path, I might not drink or use, but I cause a lot of destruction. And one of those destructions was my marriage.
Right.
And that was my part in it. When I say I wasn't a good person, is I had stopped going to meet. We had moved here from San Francisco, and the meetings were different, and people were different, and so I just stopped going to meetings, stopped taking care of myself, stopped doing that spiritual stuff that I needed to do. But the treatment for me is the same as it is for somebody coming in the first day. So, it's not a lifestyle choice, and so I think part of the thing people have to realize that it's a disease. The American Medical Association has classified it as a disease all the way back into the 70s. But the good news is it's a treatable disease, and we like to, the sensationalism in the media, we like to see the Hollywood Scarlet falling out of the car drunk, or the train wreck waiting to happen, instead of the success stories.
Right.
Right. Instead of the guy who, had an overdose at 21 years old, clinically dead, somehow, but for the grace of God, I'm sitting here today, but turned their life away. Went from taking from society, stealing, ripping people off, breaking the law, to getting sober and being a somewhat productive member of society for the past 25 years.
Well, and I just want to touch on that because we've talked briefly about just kind of when you hit bottom. And so tell us that story, because that is, it's amazing that you're sitting here.
It is. It truly is a
today.
miracle.
And again, you're meant to be here, and that's for sure.
And that's sort
you
of
have a
why
message.
I have no problem carrying the message and being open. Anonymity is a personal thing. I don't talk about the 12-step program because they don't want me sitting here as a spokesperson, right? They don't have spokespeople, but I can talk about my sobriety. So it was actually 26 years ago, and if this doesn't sort of classify as a disease of craziness.
And so you're how old?
I'm 20 years old, 21.
Still in San Francisco.
Still in San Francisco. I had this I was hooked on heroin. So at 19, I'd found heroin. And whereas before I could sort of juggle all these balls of life, right? My school, I was at University of California, Berkeley. I was great school. I was getting good grades because I was cheating and lying and manipulating my way through school, so I could go home to mom and dad and say, hey, look, everything's great in my life. So I was able to juggle all these things in my life, and then I tried heroin. And then eventually, very quickly, very rapidly, one started dropping off by another. And then all I was sitting was my disease. And so my dad had decided to take us to Hawaii on a family vacation. I said, you know what? I'm gonna go to Hawaii, sit on the beach with a Mai Tai, and I'm gonna kick dope. And I'm gonna get sober and do all. I got to Hawaii. I was on a plane back to San Francisco 24 hours later and told my dad I was sick and had to go home, and I just left. And I got home, and talk about a long plane ride.
So just from the addiction, you
just because I was so sick.
Oh, okay.
I was going through withdrawals. I was just so absolutely sick, and I had brought some I think Xanax, like a benzodiazepine, whatever it is. I was popping them like Tic Tacs. I was drinking on the plane, just trying to feel normal, but nothing was working. And I landed in San Francisco. I went to where I get, score.
And normal, meaning the high that you'd gotten now from.
Right.
That's
But
so scary,
I couldn't
right.
even feel the alcohol or the other stuff I was taking because I was so sick. So I went home. I was on the phone. I bought dope. I got on the phone with this girl. And as I was fixing up, I was talking to her on the phone. And this is a landline, okay? And, I shot, I was an intravenous drug user. And knocked out. And because it was a landline, if it was a cell phone day, and what do we do when everybody drops calls at least a couple times a day, right? And what do? We curse our cell phone carrier or whatever. But she knew, and she had enough wherewithal and awareness to know, wait, this isn't normal. Like he's in the middle of a conversation, and he just knocked out.
Did she know what you were doing?
She had her suspicions, and so she luckily lived a couple, 2 apartments down from me, apartment buildings down from me, and she came in, and my roommate was home. They knocked down the door, called the paramedics.
And so your family's in Hawaii.
My family's in Hawaii. My parents are obviously divorced. Parents are dad's in Hawaii.
Okay.
Mom's at some yoga retreat in Mexico, and they got there in time. The paramedics gave me some Narcan, which is a instant, wakes you up instantly if you're still breathing. And so I wish I could say that was it. And this is how powerful the disease was. That what was my gig was up with my parents. And the girl said, you're going to have to call your parents and let them know. And my mom had written me notes saying, because we know our kids. She didn't know exactly what it was, but I have notes, and I still carry them today, that she'd handwritten me saying, I know something's wrong with you. You're not right. I know it's drug use. So anyway, the gig was up. So she said behind door number 1 is love. You go to treatment, there's love, support, whatever you need. Behind door number 2, it's persona non grata. You're done. I'm not. So she laid the proverbial line in the sand. And so I, like a smart alcoholic, I took door number 1. I said, I can go to rehab, I can do all that. So I did. Did because I needed to, not because I wanted to. Did it for my mom and this girl, but not for Ben. And went through the whole deal and went back to Berkeley, went back to school, and I was using within 60 days again.
Oh my goodness.
And so it wasn't the rehab, it wasn't the
Well, you have to be ready. Or you have to really.
And that's the secret sauce, right? Is that if you're struggling out there, somebody who's struggling. The unfortunate thing is it's not for people who need it. I wouldn't be sitting here after 25 years just off a need. I have to want it.
Right.
Because I have to do certain things, and I have to be willing to go to any length to get it, and I got to put it first above everything else. And so I've been able to do that for the most part over the past 25 years. But just the need, we all know somebody who needs it. But it wasn't until, and it wasn't an overdose, it wasn't an arrest like I've had before, it wasn't anything from the outside that I came to that point. I was just driving across the Bay Bridge. I'd just come from a therapy session with my mom, thinking she was thinking I'm sober, the therapist is thinking I'm sober, and I had just lied, paid him $100 to sit there and lie to him about how great sobriety is and how my life's changed, and I'm high as a kite. And I drove home and I just had that moment. And that it wasn't anything else except for just, I don't want to do this anymore.
Oh my goodness.
So I picked up the phone.
Thank goodness you had that moment. Because I think for so many, maybe they do have it, but it's much later.
Well, you never know when a miracle is going to happen. And that's, that's sort of what, I tell people.
Or what message is going to resonate.
Right. Or when it's going to happen, right? So it doesn't have to be, you would think that from a normal person looking at life, like an overdose, plenty of arrests, et cetera, would be enough, right? Like, what's this guy doing? Like, enough's enough. But it's really, but the one good thing about that treatment center is that it planted the seed, right? The first treatment I went through, although I had no intention of being sober, I was doing it for my mom. I was doing it for whatever was behind door number one.
Right.
But some of it sank through. My using was never the same. So if somebody you're struggling, or you're somebody struggling, you're struggling yourself, like just show up. Keep going to meetings or talking to people, and eventually, because there's nothing worse than a head full of 12-step or recovery and a belly full of martini, right? It's like crossbone and skulls. Because every time I used, from the moment I left rehab to the day I got sober, it was never the same.
I can't even imagine. In no way is this even any kind of comparison to what you've gone through or other people have gone through. So I have an addictive personality, I feel, as well, like not to that extreme, but so I've smoked for the last 22 years. I finally quit smoking, and I've tried before, but it never worked. And I didn't want to smoke anymore. But so it was a year, October 7th. So it's been a year and a month almost. But I tell you what, I think about it every day.
Yeah.
And it's been over a year.
Yeah.
And every time something happens in my life,
you want to reach for that cigarette.
I want a cigarette so bad.
Yeah.
And it's funny, and I'll admit, I don't know, a month ago, I was having a moment. And that night, that was it. I was okay. And I had just celebrated my year, and I went and bought a pack of cigarettes. I didn't do anything with them. In fact, I even lit one, but I couldn't do it.
Well, see, that's the thing about addiction, is even after 25 years, when something goes wrong or something's not right in my life, my first gut reaction is like, what can I do? What can I take? What can I buy? What can I,
How hard is that?
It's tough, but it's what I wouldn't change it.
Right,
for the
but
world.
it's a right.
Yeah, I wouldn't change what I went through. I wouldn't change, to get back to the experience and the stories that you're telling is so great, because like we're all just made up of experiences, right? And every bad thing that's happened to me in my life, whether it's the overdose, the addiction that I had to go through, my parents' divorce, my divorce, the list goes on and on. I wouldn't, if all of a sudden you pulled out a crystal ball right there and said, here you go, Ben, you can take back whatever you want, you can change whatever you want, I wouldn't change one thing. And that's because I'm grateful for my life. Yeah. And I'm a believer of there's no such thing as selective gratefulness.
Right.
Right? You can't sit there, I can't sit there and go, I'm grateful for this, but I wish this didn't happen. I'm grateful for that, but this, I'm not that. And it's like, not to sound too corny, but life is like a continuous work of art.
Yeah, I like
painting.
corny.
Well, good. It's a painting.
Right?
My life's a painting.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful painting.
Yeah.
And you can't look at the Mona Lisa and say, oh, that's a beautiful brush stroke, but that's not. Right? It's all made up of brush strokes that create the piece of work. Well, I hope my painting's still in the works, right?
Absolutely.
But it's a pretty, I am grateful for my life today, so I'm grateful for each brush stroke because it makes up the whole picture.
Yeah, I'm so fortunate, I feel, to be able to sit down, and one of the reasons that I wanted to provide the platforms was I didn't feel it was fair for just me to take all this in and learn. And it's funny, I always joke, I was a mom at 18, but at 18 I thought I knew everything. I thought I had all the answers. You couldn't tell me anything.
Right.
And I am happily 47 at this point in my life, and I don't know anything.
Yeah.
And I only know based on my experiences and what I've learned so far, and I try to take and utilize that the best I can. But yeah, I'm still learning, and it's from you and just the amazing people in our community.
It's so interesting you say it, because at 25 years sober, or 47 years old, I'm 47 too, I feel like I know less today than I did in the first year. You know, the first year of sobriety or the first couple years, I could quote sayings out of, you know, certain literature. I could tell you what you needed to do. You know, even in business, when I first got started business, I could tell you this is the way it's going to be. And I think that with age, at least for me, where I need to be, comes a little bit of humility, right? And the humility is saying, I don't have all the answers, right? And I don't know everything. And with humility, at least for me, comes openness, that I'm willing to take in someone else's guidance or advice.
And maybe look at other experiences and other perceptions. We don't all think alike. We don't all have the same experiences. I think the world today, if we would all kind of look at each other that way and really try to empathize, or is that right, the word?
Yeah.
Have some empathy. on what the other's going through. We all are on a journey.
And it would be a nice place to live.
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
it really would
I mean,
be.
unfortunately, we're getting further away from that. But you know, I still believe that we'll come back. You know?
We should appreciate each other's differences and
celebrate them.
Yeah, and celebrate them and learn from them. And I think that's what I really enjoy doing here.
Well, yeah, and that's why I love, where I go to get help for my disease, is that it's a room full of people who, in the normal world, wouldn't be hanging out, right? In the normal world, wouldn't be, going out for coffee after, or going on retreats or whatever it is. But there's something very special about knowing that that person has been to hell, just like you have.
Right.
And they're fighting every day to try not to get back. And that's the power of relatedness. And that's where, like I said earlier, the most change has happened for me in my life. And that's the reason behind the book, too, is going through a divorce is hell. It is awful. It's, but being able to sit there and talk to somebody or a couple that has been there, but had gotten through to the other side, and the other side is phenomenal.
Right.
Our happy divorce is a great place to be.
Yeah.
And
it takes two. I mean, you have to work towards that. And if you have two willing participants that can work together and grow together and then really combine and just, because it's not about you, it's not about her, it's about the child.
That's exactly right.
And it's about the family.
And then it's, then you bring two other people into the equation, right? And I believe that Nikki and I were so committed to putting Asher first that we wouldn't have brought people into our lives who didn't commit to our guiding principle. Our North Star was what was best for Asher, period. And so bringing somebody into Asher's life had to be understand what we were doing.
Well, I think it even talks about the people that you brought into your life, because they are phenomenal beings as well, because you still travel as a family and do some things which you should be able to do. Most, I don't know everything, but I'm assuming, I know most people can't do that.
Yeah.
There's too many insecurities typically in relationships that would not allow for that.
And
that says something.
It says a tremendous amount. And it's one thing for Nikki and I to be able to do it, but it's another thing to have somebody else come in and be able to not only do it, but help it grow. Right. Perfect example is, Asher, our son. Every one of my kids, I have 3 of them now, have had the. I don't know if your kids have, but been focused on one thing. My son's music. My daughter is a lot of things. She loves a lot of things. But my Asher was always animals. Like, he didn't want to read at nighttime the Dr. Seuss books. He wanted to read animal encyclopedias. Oh, wow. And so he was just an animals font. So we always knew we wanted to take him to Africa. But because of age and the shots and the divorce, it just never happened. So this past summer, Nikki and I decided, and if anything was going to send our divorce south, it was going to be if the other one took Asher to Africa without the other one. Right. So we decided to take him. It wasn't like our spouses weren't invited, but Nikki's married to the sheriff of Hillsborough County, so taking 2.5 weeks off for him is a big deal. Right. And my wife's raising 2 young kids. Right. So my ex-wife, my son, and I went to Africa. And Chad, who's Nikki's husband, and my wife didn't put up a fight. Oh, hell no, you're not going to Africa with your ex-wife or ex-husband. Are you crazy? They were said,
that's pushing it, or anything.
But they said Asher would love that.
Yeah.
That's great for Asher. And we went off to Africa, the 3 of us.
Right.
as a parent to to this boy who loved animals.
Yeah, and that's so great for him to be able to experience that, just as you said you would. But a lot of the times, and I think that's a lesson to all of us, that if we can put aside, it's not about us.
And it's not, and I'm so glad you said that, because going through what I had to go through, to be stuck with that emotional bill to pay in a decision, in something I had no decision in,
Right.
is not right.
Right.
So, when it's okay to break your vows to your wife. I mean, I did it, so I can't judge. Together forever, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But when I held my son the first time, I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I truly understood selflessness. And
unconditional love.
Unconditional love.
Right.
So I took an inherent vow to him. And it was not okay for me to break that vow, and I always said that I would take care and protect him, and yet sometimes people, but at the same time I understood what my parents went through. Like I said, it wasn't premeditated for them. People get so blinded by these negative feelings that they don't understand the damage that they're causing their kids. And Nikki and I didn't. The other important thing is, we didn't intend to go to Africa and end this thing. Like I said, snap our fingers, our happy divorce. All we sort of wanted to do, if you probably asked us 13 years ago, was to be able to be in the same room together and not have everybody, including, and most importantly, our son, feel that palatable tension.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever been around a divorced couple.
Well, yeah, I've been one.
Okay. Well, so
Yeah.
everybody around
Right,
them feels it,
right,
much less the kids.
right.
Or more importantly, the kids. But that's probably was our goal.
Yeah.
And then we sort of went through it, and we faked it till we made it. And she would show up to Asher's baseball games with her new boyfriend, and after the game, Asher would run over to Chad and hug him, and in the inside, I'm just being pulled apart, right? I mean, that's my son around another man. And literally, I'm in my head going, okay, what's best for Asher? What's best? So I put on my big boy pants. I put the ego aside. I went up and I shook his hand, and so we faked it till we made it a lot of the times, and then it sort of just evolved. So it's important to understand that our happy divorce didn't. It was a process, and it was a process that we could never have drawn up in our wildest imagination.
Right, or even foreseen earlier on.
No.
But again, if you have the two willing people that could come together and put aside the differences and work towards a better life for everyone involoved.
And that's
it's possible. I mean,
it
you're
is
proof
possible.
of that.
And then you realize I think if anybody's gone through anything bad in their life, I can talk about me, whether it's my addiction or whether it's this divorce or whatever it is. At the end of it, I realize, hindsight's 20/20 with these things, and you realize why you have to go through it. And I could have been still married to Nikki and not been happy, and she could have been married to me and definitely not been happy. And instead, we found the people we're supposed to be with.
Right.
Right. And you see people who are, or I see people who are divorced, remarried, maybe have kids together, happy. Right? They found the love of their lives, but yet they still hold on to that resentment and anger towards their ex, when they don't realize, if you take a step back, if you didn't get divorced, you wouldn't be, where you are today. So we've been able to get through it, and I think that's one of the reasons our relationship's so healthy today,
Right.
and so extreme, is because we found the love of our lives. We both have found people who we were meant to be with. Nikki and I were oil and water. We did not belong. We were put on this earth to be best friends and to have a beautiful kid.
Right.
The marriage thing just sort of got in the way, because we were, in our mid-20s, and that's what we were supposed to do, right?
Right.
Date in 3 years, you're in your mid-20s.
Right.
Like society. But millennials get a lot of, crap, but one thing they're getting right is they're getting married later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we only know what we know at the time that we know it, right? So, I was married really young, but we don't know any different, and sometimes you think opposites attract. You hear that, right? But then a lot of the times, okay, they do maybe, but if you want to build a family on top of that and raise kids together, and if you're opposite and you think totally different, how well is that gonna? But when you're younger, you don't know to think that way.
Yeah.
So
Right.
how do you don't know what you don't know?
You don't know what you don't know, and you also don't really, or at least I didn't understand what love was until I had my son.
Yeah.
And that was the beautiful thing about having my son. You talked about unconditional love, selflessness. love him no matter what, the good and the bad. I was never able to do that with Nikki, and she was never able to do it with me. You know, I was always in love with the person that I wanted Nikki to be,
right,
and vice versa.
Right.
And my wife today, look, I am a flawed individual. Again, you know, like I understand I wouldn't want to be married to me,
right,
but yet for some reason, my wife loves everything, you know, the good and the bad. And
right.
I think that's the success story.
Well, I think too, you've gone through so many stages in your life, and everything that you've gone through has made you into this man that you've become today. And you can reflect, and you have the humility, you're humble. I mean, you know, your journey has, you know, made you into this man today that is someone that she can love. And,
right.
and so it's, you know, it's hard to say everything happens for a reason, but I do believe every part of our life happens.
I'm a believer in everything happens for a reason. Now, there's the cynics out there
right.
that say, what about childhood cancer or the Holocaust?
I had somebody made a comment to me recently, and that's why it's almost hard to come out of my mouth
right.
this time, but you know, as many years as I've been, you know, I do believe that. And really, as we all have our stories, and you know, as I keep moving forward and keep trying to make steps in a positive direction, I can reflect back, and as you go far enough, you can see a lot of the time why certain things happened,
right.
and had that's not happened, this wouldn't have happened. Had that, you know, and you
right.
can see it.
I think that expression is true if you learn from it.
Right, absolutely.
Right? And that's what I think I've been able to do in my life.
Absolutely.
Is the things that I'm grateful for that I went through and learn from it and try not to repeat it. That's when nothing happens for a reason. You know, and even with childhood cancer or something terrible that happens, you see some parents who start foundations and help others because
and
of
all
it.
the lives that were then
right.
impacted
so, I mean,
by that.
Look, there are a lot of different, but for me personally, I am 100% believer that nothing happens in life by mistake.
Right.
As long as I learn from it, right? As long as I don't repeat the same
Well, and
mistakes.
it's a shame for us not to. I mean, we're given all these experiences, again, I feel for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're supposed to take something from them.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you look at everything that you go through, and I hope we're a little wiser too. You know, anyway, it's just, I know you said you wouldn't change anything about what you've gone through, but if you could go back like 25 years ago and give your younger self any advice, something I love always asking, what advice might that be today?
Whew. I think from a professional level, I would say I think if anything, it would be don't listen to society, right?
Yeah.
I think that is, you know, be your own person. Be your own man. Don't be fearful of making career decisions that are based off of the 401k or the gold Rolex at the end of the rainbow, or the marriage that you're 25 years old, you've been dating 3 years, you moved across the country, like you're supposed to get married. But I think that would be the advice, you know, because for a lot of period of time there, I was in a job that I was miserable at. Making more money than I could ever possibly imagined, and I was also in a marriage that I wasn't happy,
mm-hmm.
But had a beautiful kid. You know.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So when you first moved from the family moved, is that how you?
Her family moved.
Okay. And then and you mentioned earlier on that you didn't know the AAs, or you didn't know like where to go.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that experiences and how.
So I moved from San Francisco, born and raised, went to elementary school right in the city, went to high school literally 4 blocks down the road, and then went to college 15 minutes across Bay Bridge in Berkeley. And that was a big move,
okay.
right? And so all of a sudden I found myself sitting with Nikki, and she said her family's moving to Florida. You know, will I come? And I said, yeah, I've been to Miami, and it was pretty cool. And at the time, Tampa was not Miami. You
right.
know? And not only that, but we moved up to North Tampa, up in Lutz, to a golf community.
Right.
And I just remember vividly the first night, laying there with eyes as big as owls, just laying in bed going, it is so quiet. I mean, like I'll never forget how quiet it was.
Right.
That's what I remember most about the first night in Tampa. I'm used to the horns honking.
Right.
And so, you know, it just was 180 degrees in the other direction from
right.
what I was used to. And so that set me on a path of, you know, resenting my wife because she made me move when she didn't, right? I'm a
right.
grown person.
Right.
We
create our own realities.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so it was a tough move. It was a tough transition. I, was lucky enough to have an opportunity to work for her dad. Learned a tremendous amount. I think I was about 26, 27, wanted to go back to school and get my MBA. Went up to his office to talk to him about it, and he laughed and said, "You really want an MBA?" And I said, "Yeah, I think it would help me, further my career." And he's a big contributor in Notre Dame, and he said, this was before the college scandal, so let's just put that. Okay. He said, "If you want an MBA, I'll get you one, to put on your wall, piece of paper." And he pretended like he was picking up the phone to call Notre Dame, and he said, "You don't need business school." He goes, "You just need life,
right.
real business life experience." And at the time, his company was sort of a much bigger version of my company, but it was diversified holdings. It was real estate, it was restaurants, it was aftermarket auto parts for the car. I mean, you couldn't imagine that. It's like my portfolio. It's all over the place, but it's diversified, right? Mm-hmm. It's some brick and mortar, some early stage investing, some later stage. But I learned a lot. I learned, he said, "I will copy in all emails, you're invited to all business meetings, you can, have carte blanche of whatever and he gave me advice. He said, "Sit in meetings, write stuff down."
Yeah.
You don't understand.
That's a great opportunity that many won't, and
I will always be for grateful.
Right.
Because I promise, I've never been to business school, but I promise you I learned more.
Right.
Because I sat in meetings, all these big high-level meetings with him, and in the beginning it was like they were talking French.
Right.
Right. And I just took tons of notes, but my notes weren't on anything but things I didn't understand. So then after the meeting, if it was a legal question, I'd go ask legal. If it was an accounting question, I'd go ask accounting. And I, sat with the CPA, and he taught me how to look through a set of financials and what they meant, and balance sheets and statement of cash flows and income. So I learned it all.
Right.
I had it all there, and he opened the doors, the resources. But I wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. And it wasn't until, and even after the divorce, he said I can always have a home there if I wanted to. But at the time, even before Nikki and I split up, I had started a real estate company and started dabbling in that by myself. And every entrepreneur sort of has that moment,
right.
Where they, and mine wasn't, I'm walking out the door, I'm writing a Jerry Maguire, memo, and I'm leaving
right.
everything without something to fall. I built up enough to at least feel secure to go out on my own. And then once I started my own business, and once I started realizing that for me, the American dream wasn't that 401k or that gold Rolex.
Right.
It was freedom.
Yeah.
It was control my own destiny. It was, if I want to take the summers off and jump, I bought an RV 4 years ago, and my kids and my wife and I get in the RV and we drive the countryside. And I can do that. Right. Because I don't have to take vacation days or, PEDs or,
right,
not PEDs,
right.
personal vacation. No,
right,
PEDs are stuff in sports, don't want to take those. But I can do that.
Right,
and that,
right.
to me, the freedom is where our happiness in my career. That's my definition of the American dream.
Well, I was going to say, what is your definition of success today?
Freedom.
Yeah.
And luckily that has been able to maintain a lifestyle that's, been okay, that I haven't had to go get a quote unquote job.
Right.
And so, yeah, could I go, do I have enough confidence in myself that I could go and, make more money and do all that? Yeah, probably. Because it's, at the end of the day, it's not that difficult, I don't think.
Right.
But I don't have that desire. To me, it's crazy. I'm 47 years old, 25 years sober. I have a 16-year-old son, and I'd say it's a cliche if it weren't true, but we're here for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And I've had enough awakening or enough awareness to realize that my biggest fear in life, and I don't like to have a lot of fears, but sitting on my deathbed, wishing that I had done things differently.
Right. Living with regrets, or
living with regrets.
I
so that's
that, yeah.
If anything, I try to live as much as possible in the present, but that is one guiding fear that I don't think will ever go away.
At the end, we want to know we did,
because it motivates me.
Right.
It motivates me to, when I decide to get involved with a company, that I'm going to be business dev or I'm going to be more hands-on. It's not a question of whether I can do it. It's a question of what kind of bandwidth is it going to take,
right.
and what sacrifices am I going to have to make will it enable me to not take or will it prohibit me from taking the RV trip during the summertime? So to me, it's just all about freedom, and the money's great, and obviously needed to live and to support my family, but for me, it's just freedom.
Yeah, peace of mind, freedom.
Peace of mind.
Right.
And it's funny because I used to think that it was laziness, and because I couldn't figure out why I was so miserable. Right. I was at my other jobs because I was making money. I was making more money than I could ever possibly imagine at 21 years old, obviously, with the addiction problem. But I thought I was just lazy, that I didn't want to go to work, But what it was it's my nature.
Right.
It's my nature to be not tied behind a desk.
Yeah. Well, I think there's many of us watching today can relate to that because we entrepreneurial minded people. I mean, I think for so many years, even for myself, I tried to have a reason, or I needed to come up with an excuse or an addiction. I mean, something to say, why I wanted to be innovative and have my own job, and I was never satisfied. I always wanted, or I was never seemed happy with what I wanted. But that's because I wasn't in my element.
Yeah. And it's funny, you hear a lot of things about the number one reasons businesses fail is because they run out of money. I don't agree with that. I think the number one reason businesses fail is because people don't start them.
Right.
People, and I understand it because I've been there, so bent up with fear about what if this doesn't happen. And one of my favorite things to do is mentor young entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And just do it.
Right.
You're never
just do it.
Just do
yeah.
it. Whoever came, I think it's a great slogan for a shoe and great slogan for life because there's if you don't do it.
There's going to be no perfect time. There's you'll never have all the ducks in a row, and I think that's part of why Edge is here. I would like to hope that we help in some way, help initiate that and eliminate fear and help people. We inform them and educate them and hopefully inspire them to do more. Goodness, you and I could talk for a long time. I know. I know we have the information on the book, Our Happy Divorce. Yeah. Definitely check it out. I think we also provided your LinkedIn contact as well. Wow, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
It's great to have one of the greatest things about even the fact that I'm an author. There's so many great things out there and so many people doing great things to get stories out there. And you're just example here locally, and hopefully it'll expand. But a platform. Technology is great.
Yeah.
I mean, the barrier to entry, right, of writing a book is easy, right? Or doing a podcast, or if you have an idea, just do it.
Just do it. Well, that's our lesson for the day.
There you go.
Just do it. Thank you so much for being with us today. Definitely check out edgebusinessmagazine.com. You can subscribe to the newsletters. We are here with you each and every week with new stories. So we'll see you next time. And until then, never stop dreaming.